1 month ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing Sam Vicary, who is a lecturer at my university. He is the MD and bass player for the Cinematic Orchestra. He is an artist in his own right and a great jazz musician playing in numerous different jazz festivals. Today we talk on themes such as ego, your skill set and working within a band. So I'm going to show you the interview footage now and I hope you find this interesting. Welcome to the second episode of Behind the Music Industry. I'm joined by Sam Vicary. Do you want to talk about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm principally a bass player, double bass, electric bass, do a lot of music production, do a lot of teaching, teach at the RNCM, Leeds College of Music, play in a number of different bands. The main band is a band called Cinematic Orchestra that I MD, lots of touring and all that kind of thing. But yeah, generally just lots of different fingers and lots of different musical pies.
Today we're talking about how to view music from a wider perspective. For example, your role in a band, your skill set, removing your ego, and being a team player. So to kick things off, let's talk about the process of serving the song. What is your process in making sure everything serves the song? An example I've got written down would be the bass player having like a flashy bass line. How do you determine whether it is the right fit for the song?
The thing for me is, in terms of serving a song and knowing your role, is all about the vocal comes first. How are you fitting within that? I always start with the most basic approach and then have melodic options available and think of it like that.
So what is your basic approach?
Just concrete in the harmony. Just play roots, just to figure out where I want to be, and then I suppose from there, like where I am on the bass, in terms of actually orchestrating that, what octave am I playing, for example?
Yeah.
And then the kind of relationship between that and the vocal. It's nice to get something in a track that's very expressive, so you can kind of play the role and then now and again interject something, I know a lot of people go on that kind of like one kind of flashy thing per track, thing, which kind of works actually. And it's just listening back, analysing. I'm quite into that approach. And it depends who I'm working with as well. Some artists, they really want your imprint on it, in which case obviously do your thing, but then sometimes it's kind of like there'll be specific requirements or a certain vibe, certain energy that you kind of got to lock in with.
If you're acting as the MD, you mentioned what octave you would play in as the bass player. Do you, as an MD, determine what other players sound like, or do you kind of leave that to them?
In that band in particular, it's very much like everyone is there for what they do. Especially Luke, for example. Luke's been in the band for 20 years, so he does Luke, and that's part of the sound of the band because he's kind of, he's grown around that kind of idea. In that case, it's more just like directing in the most ground level. So like everything is cueing, for example, I cue sections. I suppose the role in that band, a lot of it is actually the setting up of all the tech, so all the Ableton and all the different sound sources and all of that kind of stuff is stuff that I do before rehearsals, before shows. So because of that, I suppose that's why the broader title of musical director is there, I suppose.
So rather than sound design of the people you hire the people for their specific sound. You just kind of get the cogs turning.
Yeah. I suppose I'm like an in-between between Jason, he has that's cool and it's his music, so he knows what he wants. But I'm kind of in between that, I suppose, kind of facilitating to get back some of those ideas with the musicians and also the prep side. So it's almost like kind of helping conceive the idea in a technical and a musical way.
You mentioned talking about egos and removing your ego. Do you find there to be few egos when you're working, maybe within the studio or even like a rehearsal performance kind of setting?
Yeah, I suppose everyone's got an ego. And everyone's kind of.
Well, if you need that one flashy moment.
Everyone kind of has that, and I suppose it's like you said at the top, the kind of working in a team kind of aspect. I think that's super important. It's like you've got to think about the overall impression of what you're creating as an ensemble, rather than just you thinking about what you're playing. And that's what I meant, and that's what I kind of see with in terms of the ego. It's like egos are great, and if they can fit in, then that's amazing. Because then you'll get in these kind of super creative people that have their own thing. Then you can sit back and go, like, okay, I'm good. That guy's doing that now, so I'm gonna just sit back and just be that support. And then there'll be time where my instrument or whatever I'm doing will become at the forefront. So it's like it's balancing all of that, I suppose.
I would just go straight back to saving the song.
Yeah.
There are moments though where the vocal line isn't quite the main focus. How do you determine who gets that spot? I think Philip Conrad said when you're playing bass, you have to kind of hear the bigger picture that's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And kind of sit back and allow for more space. And you want to be told to play more, not play less in a session. Yeah. How do you determine who fills that space?
Well, I suppose it does depend on the track, really, doesn't it?
Right.
In terms of what the track requires at that point. If the vocal's there and the vocal isn't there, it's like, well, does there need to be something that's soloistic or improvisatory, or does it need to be just a refrain from that? That could be everyone just sitting in the pocket, you know, doing what they were doing before, but just kind of like actually focusing on that. I think it's quite common for bassists to get into kind of roles where you do see things from that perspective, because you're the glue, aren't you? It's like super important. And it's also, that's kind of why I branched into production and that world. That really informed live playing and my bass playing. Because when you're producing and you're writing, you're like, what does it actually require, as opposed to on a gig? You know, what facility do I have? Let's play all these chops. But you know, the production angle, the compositional angle is really what made my playing get better, but not in a kind of chops way, just in a tone, you know, thinking about tone, thinking about where you sit in the mix, all that kind of stuff. And thinking of everything in a macro sense, you know, like how is everything fitting together? And getting out of the ego thing, I suppose. With
the ego thing, would you say, as a bass player, how important are bass chops?
I don't think anyone's ever employed me for like my chops. The approach I took basically was in terms of like thinking of bass as a whole, in terms of just thinking like the role and the frequency element. So for me it was like, well, electric bass, cool, great. Studied on electric bass, great. And then I was like, no, I want to play jazz, cool, double bass. And then I was like, okay, more into electronic music production. I need to get some synth bass together.
Yeah.
So I kind of went for that. So it's like, for me, it's like, what does this band require? What sonic kind of sensibility do you need to perform in this band? If it's an electronic thing, it's like, cool, the rehearsal just been that. It's like, well, it's Moog, stuff fatty, using that, and a bit of electric. That's probably got me more work than chops, but definitely. How transferable are your skills? And with certain bands, I just play electric, certain bands I just play double. Cinematics, I play synth, double, electric, and some like live dubby things. So that's kind of all of my skill set. So I suppose it's like broadening that is what gets you more work, you know, it's like kind of being malleable to the situation.
Yeah.
And just having a really good sense of like musicality, then you can apply any of this stuff to the right thing. For me personally, when I think of music, bass music for example, like Victor Woodland for example, is an incredible facility. I could never play like that. But for me, I don't like the music. I don't think I ever liked the actual voice. So what I actually listen to is like 4-chord loop going around and there's loads of slapping. I'm like, well, I'd rather listen to like Joni Mitchell. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, for sure. Or, you know, Nick Drake. That's where I kind of, the line gets blurred. Obviously Jacko's in there, and you know, Jacko's kind of like the exception to that rule. But personally, when it's like bass music, I'm like...
Yeah, I can't do it. I made it myself, like 2 tracks, and was like, I don't even like listening to it, why am I making it? And then I did solo artist stuff and was like, no, I like being a bass player. There are a lot of people that kind of get frustrated in sessions. They're overthinking and believe they can't keep up with bandmates' ideas or kind of technical ability. Do you have much experience with this or have seen people deal with this?
I mean, I had that a lot when I was studying, because I was studying jazz and way behind a lot of the people that I was playing with. But I think surrounding yourself with people that are going to encourage you to improve and a safe space in which for that to happen is like super important. Sometimes you have to find your tribe really. But in terms of frustration on like ability, it's like ultimately everybody is progressing at a different rate. You know, some people will come into a music college or establishment and already be amazing, and then they'll leave and they'll still be amazing, but they've just kind of plateaued. And then other people will come in quite far behind, but I don't even know what that actually means, far behind. It is what it is. But we'll then just rock it, you know. It's just being aware of your own self-development. And as long as you feel like you're developing and you're happy with the rate you're developing, it doesn't actually matter about anybody else at all. It will come together for you at the time that's right for you, not for anybody else. So I get it, if you're in like a rehearsal or whatever and you're struggling to get something out, it's like, I suppose at some point you have to just accept that, like, well, that's where I'm at right now, and try not to let it knock the confidence out of you, so then you don't want to practice and you don't want to play and you don't want to do all that kind of stuff. I mean, I used to practice so much, like all the time, but that was just because I genuinely just loved it.
Kind of going off the frustration of the sessions kind of thing, have you found yourself sat in a session where you're playing a song and you're not really feeling it and you feel a bit uncomfortable or unattached to the bass line that you're kind of playing?
Yeah, I suppose that in that kind of second, I'll probably gently offer something else. Ultimately, people know when you enjoy playing something, and that's actually what people want to hear. Sometimes, people are very specific. I want you to play this exact bass line, but then that could be like a produced record that sounds great, and then live it's like, well, it's not really working. So can we try something else? Most musicians are up for sharing ideas and trading things, and like figuring things out together and all that kind of stuff. I think getting in your head about it too much is probably what will hold you back. People always want a part of you, whether it's playing for an artist where it's very clear what that is that they do. We've employed you for a reason. There's always that bit where you can obviously be super expressive.
What would you say are the most important things to be aware of that you might not have known then but know now? What is like the survival kit to your first studio or session day?
I suppose with studio stuff, it's like everything takes a long time, so be aware of that. Setup could take like 4 hours. What I really noticed with the studio was like actually my focusing on your fundamentals as a player really they're under the microscope, aren't they? I suppose it's having practiced enough and being as assured as you can to really know that you've got that together, and then also not let it get in your head.
Yeah, I was about to bring up getting in your head.
Yeah.
Like, it must be so easy to just sit down and go, what am I playing?
And I suppose it's prep, isn't it? Being prepared for the session is like super important. But then there's different ways in which I suppose you can have very, very relaxed studio sessions. Almost in people's houses or whatever, or you can have super shiny studios that aren't really my bag because it's like very clinical, and then everything sounds very clinical, and you kind of lose a bit of the vibe. So it's kind of important for me, is kind of the space in which I'm working is quite important. But in terms of a toolkit, I suppose just be super prepared and try and not get in your head about the tiniest things, because it will throw up stuff that you hadn't noticed in a live gig, and then all of a sudden, like tone, for example, when you're in the studio, tone is all of a sudden it's like,
Have you ever had a session where you go in, idea in hand, and they've just gone, we don't like that idea, bring something new?
Yeah. Quite a lot of time. I've had some hilarious things actually. We were doing one session where I had a manager of the artist singing a bass line down the cans.
Right, okay.
In the session.
As you were playing, or just...
No, before.
Right, okay.
But completely made absolutely no sense in comparison to actually what was going on in the music.
Yeah.
He was like singing in a different key. He was like, to do this rhythmically, I was like, I don't even know what that is. But one of my really good friends is on piano, and he couldn't be seen. He was just like, just do the same. And I did the same, and he was like, that's it.
You did just play the same line as before?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I did a session as well when I lived in London. It was for a singer-songwriter, and it just went on and on. I must have done about 30 takes of the same track. Any more than 3 takes is like, unless someone wants anything very, very specific changing, then there's no point here. We're just going over it. But I was literally playing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And there was no direction, and it was just ridiculous. That really makes you think like, this isn't music.
And after 30 takes, they took take 1.
I think it was take 2 I think they used. It really does depend on the music, doesn't it? You know, the genre in which you're working in. But it's just having having confidence in what you know exactly what you're playing. And it happens live as well. I've had some things where I just can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Like big gigs, you just can't, because of the room. It's like, well, I can't. The sound's impossible in here.
Yeah.
So it's like knowing that I am playing the right thing in time, but it doesn't sound like I'm in time.
No,
like reverbs in big room. Brixton Academy is a classic one. It's got massive decayed reverbs, and you play a note, it comes back. It actually comes back almost louder, but a couple of seconds later. So that was just like. What? That's when you've got to go like, well, I know my practice is paying off. I know I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I'm just being super confident about it.
One of my final questions is, how do you balance the work side and enjoyment side of music?
I think now, everything I do, actually, luckily, I do enjoy. And everything I do is to do with music, but it's very different aspects of music. So that kind of keeps me engaged and loving it, I suppose. And you get to, just meeting so many different people. I think there's a lot of it as well. It's like, everyone that I play with, I really want to be playing with them. And that's taken a good few years of carving that out to get to that point. And it's almost becomes a thing of like, well, I can be playing any music if it's with the right people, we're going to have fun, it's going to be great. That for me is the enjoyment of it, is the communication, the interaction between musicians and audiences. I think the balance for me in terms of real enjoyment is having a creative outlet in which I write my own music and release my own music. For me, it doesn't really matter to me whether anything happens with that or not. It's just, that is purely me and my expression as an artist in one place, and I can put it out there. That for me is like, having that outlet to do that is really, really important, because then I can do different roles for different other people in different bands, knowing that I've still got that full creative license somewhere else. So I'm not kind of just working on other people's music all the time, although I really enjoy that. So the balance is hard.
Yeah.
I think to find that balance is really hard.
One thing people might want to know is, you're alone with your instruments.
Yeah.
That sounds bad out of context. You're alone and you're practicing, and you might not have a session for a little while. How do you keep it fun?
Just improvising. If I'm sat down with an instrument now, I'm just improvising basically. I might just choose a mode and just play a noodle. That's kind of like a kind of thoughtless kind of way of playing, isn't it? I don't really have my instruments at home. I've got a studio space, and I try not to do anything music at home actually. I need the separation these days.
Do you not kind of feel like, oh, it's a bit of a hassle to practice today?
I suppose so. In terms of like practicing bass, I don't do it as much. My practice now really is more production. If you want to see like, I think in my practice is writing, is composing. So that is all in that space. All my equipment is there ready to go. In terms of bass, proper focus bass practice, it's more kind of for specific things, if I've got certain sets to learn and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, everyone needs to practice, I should probably practice more, but it's like for me, my focus has gone more production and composing. Having that separate space kind of makes sense for that. And I'm playing a lot all the time anyway. There's not a week goes by where I haven't got maybe 2 or more gigs. So I'm always, which is kind of what I like to do. If I'm not touring, then I want to be in Manchester playing. I don't get too snooty about what it is that I play. With the right people, I just want to play and keep everything working and keep, you know what I mean? Because I lose the chops, if you like.
Those are so important chops.
Those tiny amount of chops that I've got.
Now, I came to you over a year ago now and talked to you about my imposter syndrome, and you were one of the tutors that kind of spoke to me and gave me some advice with it. Have you had your own kind of experience with it? And if someone was watching this kind of dealing with imposter syndrome, what would you kind of say to them?
I definitely have, at certain points of my career. What's really, really useful in that is surrounding yourself with people that you can really trust and be vulnerable with. That's like super, super important. That's not always possible, I suppose, but I remember when I graduated from Leeds College of Music doing a jazz degree, but I then started teaching myself double bass. But then within a year I was playing with the people that were my tutors on the jazz degree. I was then playing with them. And I had massive imposter syndrome because I was like, well, I've only been playing this instrument for a year. Do you know what I mean? You might have the kind of like technical know-how of like what you need to play and where you need to play it and know the music. But it's like the actual physicality of the double bass. It's like, what am I doing here? Yeah. But then they were wicked musicians and great people. So they were just like, it's cool, you know. It just felt like they were kind of like giving me that opportunity, but it was also such a super safe place to develop. But then the imposter syndrome, it comes into a lot of different lines of work. You know, I've had it in a teaching environment as well, where it's like, well, I know what I know, but I'm going to teach these people other things, but they probably know more about certain things. And I'm just kind of like, well, that's actually fine. It's like, I know what I know, I'm at the level that I am, and I'm happy with that. And I suppose that is kind of a key thing to remember, isn't it? Like I said earlier, it's like everyone's developing at a different pace, and it's not a competition. So it's not like you're going to win music.
I've said that.
Complete music. Yeah. It's like, it really doesn't matter.
On the topic of imposter syndrome, when I was dealing with it, I was looking for videos online of people telling me that it's okay to feel this way and not to give up. So I was really contemplating quitting music. And a long story short, I decided to keep going and not quit, but I couldn't find any of them videos on YouTube. So I decided to be the person to make one of them videos so that when other people felt that way, they had something to watch that was pretty much don't give up, keep going. It's okay to feel this way and you're not alone. And you can check that out here. So back to the interview.
Ultimately, it's like, is your enjoyment of it and other people's enjoyment of you enjoying it? Do you know what I mean? It's just sharing a beautiful thing, and that's what it is. Like, it's a form of communication, interaction, isn't it? So it's kind of everyone. I imagine every musician would have had that at some point, that imposter. So it's basically, I suppose, a good thing to remember is like, if you're feeling that, you're not the only one. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the industry and stuff, it's hard sometimes. It does feel like competition. There's a really cool book by a guy called Kenny Werner called Effortless Mastery. He's like a New York jazz pianist. I remember reading that when I was at college, and that was amazing. It's basically about getting in the place when you're creating in that flow state and getting rid of performance anxiety. And I've had, been in bands with people that have had that. And people deal with that in different ways, but I think probably the most healthy way to do that is to kind of a routine before you play and be able to kind of like get in your zone, get in that place.
What's your routine before you play?
I do have like a little process. I like to check all my equipment. I like to check everything's good, and then I go and chill. And then I like just being on my own or very quiet backstage area, just chilling. If my friends and family and stuff come to big shows, and I kind of like, I'll see you after.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I don't like, it's just too much. It's like I need to get at least half an hour. I'm going to get my head in this now.
Yeah.
It's it's not for every gig, obviously. That depends on what it is, but that's just a place where I'm up. I know people that sit and meditate for 10 minutes before a gig, or before and after a gig, or there's so many different ways you can do that. But I can be a bit of a pacer sometimes, like just pace.
I'm the same. I like pace.
That kind of works for me. It's fine. But everyone has their different approaches to it. But it's finding what works for you. But again, it's taken me a long time, and I've had a lot of experiences where I've just been like rabbing a headlights for a gig, just like whoa, or something has thrown me and it's really got in my head, and I've had to really, really work hard to straighten my head in the gig. that's quite tricky.
Has that happened like on stage mid-song?
Sometimes, yeah. Where it's just, so I don't know, something else is going on that's not, other part of my life, and then it's kind of like, whoa. And it's getting into that place where it's like, this is what I'm here to do right now, and I'm in that zone, and let's make it as good as we possibly can. That kind of attention.
Just keeping a cool head about yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. But that is just, a lot of that is just literally just experience. Just doing like thousands of gigs. It's like you quickly kind of realise, you don't quickly realise, it takes a while, but then you're like, you get so comfortable. That's just your like place, that's where you're supposed to be. And it's just like, you're not really thinking too much about it.
I'm reading a book called The Chimp Paradox. The chimp in your brain is giving you these negative things. It's like fight, flight or freeze before you go on stage, and it's just trying to calm that down. I think what you said, a routine before going on stage, that's a pretty good idea.
It doesn't have to be anything like really out there. Just like 10 minutes on your own, just breathing, just to get the heart rate down. And you want a bit of that kind of like excitement, obviously, but it's like knowing to kind of like how to use that to it's most beneficial for you. I just think on gigs as well, I was like looking up. Interaction with bandmates is like so important for me. If my head goes down too much, I can't afford to do that with a lot of gigs if I'm queuing things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you kind of you get in your head and your head's gone and you're like, and you see other people in the band, it's like, no, come on, let's, like looking over someone, they're like, yeah. Not like a really cheesy way, but just like in a kind of like, we're in this, like this is happening.
You don't want to feel alone while you're on stage with other people.
Exactly, yeah.
And you're making music with them for the fun of making music with them. Well, thank you for watching the second episode of Behind the Music Industry. I had a better name for it, but I've already got one episode out, so thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, Dave.
Thank you for watching.